that report will be uploaded to our digital channel, so you can rewatch it there. As promised, we get into matters state of democracy in East Africa, and we've labeled this discussion region of treason. I'm joined in studio by Donald Dea, and he is the CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, usually based in Arusha, but we're lucky today we caught him in Nairobi. Karibu sana.
Asante.
And we're also joined virtually by Tito Magoti, a human rights lawyer. Wakili, karibu.
Asante sana.
All right, Tito, I'll start with you. What did you make of the speech that Samia Suluhu Hassan made in Parliament yesterday? Some say it was the extension of an olive branch, the reason being that she directed the prosecution to review treason charges against young people, saying, quoting the Bible and saying, for instance, that they did not know what they were doing. She also said within 100 days, Tanzania would commence reforms to the constitution. And what am I forgetting? There's one more thing she did.
A commission of inquiry.
Commission of inquiry on the deaths that were occasioned by the protests over the elections. What did you make of the speech?
You know, I mean, Olive, can you hear me?
I can, Tito. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, for me, this is the first question would be, at what capacity is she bringing all these proposals? Because she is illegitimate. We are Tanzanians and we never voted for her. So she's going through this whole question of political legitimacy. There wasn't an election in Tanzania to begin with. So anything she's bringing forward, I think is, you'd say, and someone who is struggling to gain political legitimacy, but also secondly, investigation into what and who is the investigator, on what account, on what terms of reference. Because if there was a killing in Tanzania, it was sanctioned by the state. You know, the law enforcement agencies from Zanzibar, the KMKM, we had stories of foreign forces in the country because, you know, some of them could not speak to us in Swahili, or kuweza kuongea Kiswahili, and then we would say, this is a foreign force. So who is going to investigate this? Because and then another question is that in whose capacity were they acting? If there's a foreign force in Tanzania, who ordered them in the country, who authorized their entrance in the country? But also, if you speak about an inquiry, who is this person who is commissioning an inquiry to inquire into an account of their own doing? And as Don, my brother Don would agree with me that we have this principle in law that no one investigates a cause of their own doing. So I think what happened in the parliament was a mockery. It was an insult to the will of the people of Tanzania. It is something that we don't need practically. It is something that we think it shouldn't be spearheaded by someone who is, you know, practically blood, you know, a killer, a criminal, who we think that should be investigated in the first place. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So Tito, Don, raises a question of the legitimacy of her presidency. We've seen the AU, SADC, in the preliminary reports from their observers of the election, say essentially this was a shambles, this election. And President William Ruto himself, though he congratulated Samia Suluhu Hassan in a recent interview aired by Al Jazeera, seemed amused by the prospect that in a democracy she could have secured 97% of the popular vote, the turnout being put at 87%, despite the conditions that surrounded this election. What do you make of the way she's navigating that situation? Because in her I think it was in her inauguration speech, she quoted Benjamin Mkapa, and she said, well, the observers will say what they will. Tanzania is under no obligation to take their recommendations on board.
First, I really thank my brother Tito for speaking. As Pan-Africanists, as people who love this continent, we listen to the citizens of the continent. And I think our colleagues, our comrades from Tanzania are telling us very clearly what they want and what they do not want. And that is what we echo, that is what we support. Second, I would say that despite its imperfections, yesterday was a monumental climb down from the de facto head of state in Tanzania. If you look at the tone and the tenor of the inauguration speech that was done in some small military establishment, vis-a-vis what she said in Parliament yesterday, I think it means that she and the administration that she runs over and she runs and the people of Tanzania are beginning, and the administration are beginning to understand or to appreciate or to accept what the people of Tanzania want. I'd say that thirdly, I lived through, as a Kenyan and as a Pan-Africanist, I lived through the 2007-2008 moment in Kenya. And I remember when the climb down, happened and what it enabled. And it does not mean that we have to replicate what happened in Kenya then. We really have to listen to what our Tanzanian colleagues say. And what I tell to the Kenyans, for every person that died over a 3-month period in Kenya, there's a possibility that 3 died over a 3-day period in Tanzania. I do not know how our comrades will recover from the level of atrocity that they saw. Now, you've mentioned our regional institutions. Our regional institutions have shamed themselves completely. The African Union, especially our chief executive, Yusufu Ahmed, probably has to consider resigning, and because I don't think he has the moral strength to do that, the heads of state have to see how to set him aside and give themselves a chief executive that can properly advise them on the issues that are happening.
You talk about the AU chair?
The AU Commission the chair of the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, who did not even bother, and I know that for a fact, because we're talking to everybody on the ground, did not even bother to talk to his team that was on the ground, the chair of the AU Election Observation Mission, his own Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, to ask what was the tone and tenor on the ground before he issued his statement. So there's a shamefulness that has happened there that disables the AU to be able to intervene, for instance, how they intervened in Kenya in 2008. And the same with the East African community. The less said, the better. Unless other independent organs and institutions of the East African community, such as the Legislative Assembly or the court, take a different view, and a view that will genuinely help the people of Tanzania to arrive at the peace, and a peace that's based on truth, that's based on justice, that's based on accountability, and that's based on genuine reconciliation. But I do honor that the de facto chief executive at least did a climb down to open an avenue to talk with the people of Tanzania about what their future should be.
Mm-hmm. Tito, what do you say? How do you respond to what Don is saying? Because your constitution, as I understand it, you cannot challenge in court the outcome of the election. Once it has been declared, it is essentially what it is. What are you asking for to happen?
No, I mean, Oli, in this context, we have to understand that there wasn't an election in Tanzania. So there's nothing to challenge. You cannot challenge something that never happened, despite the fact that our constitutional dispensation prohibits challenging, an outcome of the presidential election once announced, despite a ruling of the African court that directed Tanzania to amend the constitution, Article 41(7), to allow for the outcome to be challenged. So that is one. Two, I think in the context of what my brother Don said, and I agree with him, that the people should be listened. What is it that people want that never happened? And we're facing a big constitutional, electoral, political crisis that is not appreciated continentally. The people of Tanzania want to participate in governance to begin with. The people of Tanzania want the votes to count. The people of Tanzania want an end to enforced disappearances, torture, abduction of government critics. The people of Tanzania want, a release of all political prisoners. The people of Tanzania want to see a new day that will guarantee that, you wake up, you go about your work, your deals without having to fear that you'll be repressed. The people of Tanzania practically want an end to this iron fist rule of CCM that we have seen for the past 6 decades. So there's so much to do, but it all links to the constitutional and governance architecture dispensation that has been in place for the past 6 decades in Tanzania.
All right, Tito, Tanzania is in a situation where even the international community doesn't know how many deaths occurred, because you have Chadema putting the figures in the thousands, you have the United Nations talking about hundreds, and then you have the Tanzanian government opposing those figures but not giving any of their own. So what is the sentiment on the ground where that is concerned?
And this triggers independent inquiry, into the massacre. I can reliably say that, we have had more than 10,000 deaths in Tanzania. The United Nations, I know they said hundreds, and this might mean hundreds, might mean thousand, and more. The Chadema party said what they said, but to be honest, is that the fact is that the media was censored. We didn't have internet. We could watch, we could document, but until today, what is it that the Tanzanian media has said relating to the death toll? What is it that the Tanzanian media has said relating to the people who are injured? What is it that the Tanzanian media has said relating to the mass graves? So I think, to conclude this, I wouldn't call it debate. I would say to conclude this contestation that we're having, we need to have an independent inquiry into the massacre that happened, such that the truth comes out and then justice is served, not only in the interests of those we lost fighting for the flag of Tanzania, but also for a new dawn in Tanzania that we want.
All right, Don, I'll ask you to have the last word on this subject matter. Did the international community, I know you've said the AU failed Tanzanians, did the East African community fail Tanzania? And I ask that question because, you have a president in Kenya who clearly exhibits skepticism over that result. And he says, they do their thing how they do their thing there. And then you have, but he's the same president who says he does not regret the shoot in the leg order over protests that he gave. We have a president in Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, who essentially brags about unlawful detention, including of 2 Kenyan nationals. Kizza Besigye was abducted from Kenya, and yet during the aforementioned Al Jazeera interview, you have a president who is saying, no, we hosted RSF because Kenya is only free space in the region. What does that say? Do you agree with a headline I saw recently that called it the Trinity of Terror?
Abductistan. That's what the young people of East Africa are calling it. Our leaders are in their own solidarity. a solidarity where they help each other to launder crime. And they help each other to try and abduct citizens. My own sister, Maria Sarungi Sehai, survived by the skin of her teeth from abduction in Kenya into what was going to be certain death in Tanzania. Even before the story of Kizza Besigye, we had the 56 young Ugandans who were abducted from the Catholic facility in Kisumu. So, what the people nationals of East and the Turkish nationals and so on, and lots of others, and South Sudan has many other sad stories. We've got, as a Pan-African Lawyers Union, about 10 cases we're litigating either at the African Court of Human and People's Rights or the East African Court of Justice on these issues. So it is quite okay for the people of East Africa to be in as much solidarity with each other as their leaders are with each other. Now, in respect of what the de facto head of state is trying to say now in Tanzania, and we must bear in mind that everything that's happening in Tanzania now will happen in Uganda
in January?
In the next, no, not in January. Voting day is 15th January, 1 month before we will feel it. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, for the de facto head of state in Tanzania, if you're extending an olive leaf, let it be in a process that first the people of Tanzania, then Pan-Africanists will recognize as a genuine process, because you cannot investigate yourself. You asked me about the East African community, you asked me about the African Union. I would like to break this down, not into one monolith, but there are various organs, institutions, specialized agencies. So for instance, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which is part of the AU, has been very clear and has issued resolutions and press releases on Tanzania. The African Union Election Observation Mission that was headed by a head of state, a retired head of state, and was mostly made up of government officials, were quite clear. So I think there are parts of the AU and parts of the EAC on which we have hope. So I think each organ, institution, specialized agency, and even ad hoc mechanism has to make itself accountable. And for people like our elder sister, Speciosia Wandera.
I will have to cut you short at that point on account of time. I do apologize. But it is a conversation that we will continue. Tito Magoti, thank you for speaking to us this evening. Human rights lawyer, and we've also had in studio Dawn Dare, who is the CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Union. I'm keen to hear you finish that particular thought. We take a break.
I had taken